and welcome to this meeting of Inverclyde Council's Policy and Resources Committee. This meeting is being held remotely and also in person and will be filmed and recorded for live and subsequent broadcast available through the Council's website. The Council is a data controller under the General Data Protection Regulations and Data Protection Act 2018. We broadcast and record Council meetings to fulfil our public task obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected during the process will be retained in accordance with the Council's policies available through the Council's website. Members of the Council are reminded that they should follow the Council's establishment protocol, included around the use of the chat facility, and that comments made in the chat facility are visible to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who have also received invites to the meeting. Okay, item 1 is apologies, substitutions and declarations of interest. We have apologies and substitutions.
Convener, we have an apology from Councillor Armstrong to be substituted by Councillor Daisy. We'll move to a roll call.
Okay, thank you.
And the following councillors, please indicate if they're present at the meeting. Councillor Curley.
Present in chamber.
Councillor Daisley. Councillor Daisley. He is present in the
Sure, on mute.
Councillor Law. Councillor McCluskey.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor McCabe.
Present chamber.
Councillor McCormick.
Can you help here?
Councillor McCormick.
Are we having some issues with
I'm wondering if
not being able to hear the chamber? Can anybody online hear the chamber? Mona can.
Yes, yeah, it's fine. Yep.
I can hear as well.
Councillor Maguire.
Here, present.
Councillor McVeigh.
In chamber.
Councillor Moran.
In the chamber.
Councillor Robertson.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Wilson.
Present in the chamber.
Are there any declarations of interest?
No. Okay, can we just maybe just check those councillors and we'll be with you. Yeah, again.
Councillor Daisley.
Disappeared.
He's gone now.
Councillor Law.
Councillor Law, call on you, so.
Yes.
We think so, yeah. Lindsay's going to phone in from, she's in the meeting as well. We got to wait for a minute.
Yeah, I think we'll wait. Can you try Councillor Corner again? He seems to disappear as well. So maybe going out. Yeah, I think we'll give it a.
Does Councillor Law maybe need unmuted because call it in user choose shown as being muted?
So is Councillor Daisley. Because she's phoned in, she needs to unmute it through that as well.
Nope.
That's Councillor Law.
Yeah.
Oh, hi there.
Hi. Sorry. I'm just having problems with the sound. Yeah, I'm here present remotely.
Okay, thank you. We can hear you now.
Thanks. That's good.
And Lindsay was going to phone after Daisy.
Yeah. Section 8 phone, Councillor Corner.
Hi there, it's Lindsay. It's just to say that Councillor Daisley is having connection problems. He's having to come out and rejoin. I'll try Councillor McCormick now.
Thank you.
I had problems connected to the briefing this morning as well.
Wonder why you missed the flag. for a moment. Sure.
Start off.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay.
Too bad. No, I'm not.
No, no, I'll pay it, so. Yeah. Councillor Daisy, but you're on mute, so unmute, we'll get started.
Okay, we're going to start the meeting again. James, Councillor Daisley, just to check you can hear us.
Yeah, I can. Thank you, convener. I'm back and I can hear you now. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're still trying to get Councillor McCormick into the meeting, but we'll make a start. So I think we've done declarations of interest. Unless you've got any declarations of interest, James.
No, I don't.
Okay. Right, so item 2 on our agenda is the 2023 Policy and Resources Committee and the General Fund Revenue Budget update as at 28th of February 2023. And Angela's going to speak to that report. Angela?
Thank you, convener. Yes, this is the revenue outturn report for period 11, covering the service committees, also covering the general funds position and the common good position. Just the main things to highlight from it is that the latest projection is a 683,000 overspend, which is a reduction from the last report that we sent up. And also that this then impacts into the general fund position, which is now reporting an underspend of £1,098,000. And just to highlight to the committee as well, the fee reserves position or the general fund reserves position that is attached now shows that there's a 1.264 excess reserves being reported this period. The report does include any adjustments and decisions that were taken as part of the budget process for 2020-2024, which was set in March, and these are reflected in there. Also, there is a common good position, and the common good position is highlighting just now that we are still projecting to be in surplus in the year. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Angela. Any questions, comments? Elizabeth, Councillor Alston?
Thanks, convener. It's just a quick question about 3.2.f, where we've got the overspend in terms of utility and fuel prices. Just checking what the change in that has been over the last few months, and checking really that our 23-24 profiling for the budget is okay to deal with whatever that change might be.
Angela?
Yeah, convener through you. The prices are changing quite considerably all the time, and we have looked at the most recent pricing just last week, and there is a shift between the gas and the electricity prices, but looking at what we've put into the budgets, the decisions that we took in March just now, it still seems sufficient, the funding that we have set aside for it at this time. There is a change between the price for gas and electricity, but overall the net figure is still sufficient at this point.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from members? No. Okay, agreed recommendations? Thank you, colleagues. Okay, moving on to item 3, which is the Policy and Resources Capital Budget and the overall 2022-26 capital programme. Alan's going to speak to that.
Thank you and good afternoon, members. This report covers the Policy Resources Own Capital Programme, which is showing £107,000 or 20% advancement, but also the overall programme, which shows slippage in 2022-23 of 25%, the details of which will be included in the annual report to the August Policy and Resources Committee. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Any questions from members? No? Okay, can we agree recommendations?
Agree.
Okay, that takes us on to item 4, which is the Finance Services Update. And again, Alan.
Thank you, Convener. This report provides the usual wide-ranging update on a number of activities being undertaken by the Finance Service, as listed in 1.3 of the report. Decisions are sought in relation to the war pension disregard, discretion, and the granting of delegated powers in relation to the insurance tender, which will require accepted before the next meeting of this committee. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Rosendahl.
Yeah, could I ask that page 28 at 3.4 energy support payments and the poor take-up by applicants? Any reason for that, do you think, Alan?
I'll likely start this and then maybe pass over to Tracy Button, who's also attending remotely today, whose team are delivering this. The position in Inverclyde is not atypical of what is going on elsewhere. It appears that the scheme is quite difficult to navigate, requires quite a lot of information, is not being actively promoted to reduce the prevalence of fraud, is not actively promoted by the UK government. The council certainly has done, I believe, as much as it can through both the corporate comms team, but also through the good officers of the HSCP, who've written to care homes and nursing homes to try and increase uptake. And Tracy's team have also contacted people. I was asking Tracy for an update just before the committee, and at today's date, we've paid 95 payments, and we have received 136 applications. So it's still barely 10% of what the UK government estimated the uptake would be within Inverclyde, but we were in Glasgow was below 5%, and it does seem to be something which I know COSLA are taking up with the UK government to see if there can be some extension or some loosening of some of the narrow criteria, the access difficulties that people are clearly having when they're able to access the scheme because people are due the money and are clearly not accessing.
Thank you, Alan. I take it doesn't mean they don't need the money, does it?
I'd be highly surprised if that was the case, given the pressures that they're on those utility bills.
I think we all need the money these days. So I think it is important we try and continue to press through COSLA for the UK government to look at extending the deadlines, because it would certainly be a shame that if people missed out on a significant amount of money that they're due to get. Alison?
Thanks, Leader. Just to follow up on that, Alan, two questions. How many of the 1,100 are care home residents? And second question, has the engagement with care homes been with the care homes directly, or is there any way for the HSCP to contact either the individuals in the care homes themselves or the families of the individuals in care homes in order for them to apply on their behalf?
You convenient at this point, I pass over to Tracy. Thank you.
Tracy?
Through you, convener. Thank you. Thanks, Alan. At this point, we don't know the breakdown of who is eligible for the payments. That's certainly a question that has been asked by councils, and the information just isn't available, hasn't been forthcoming. The contact has been made directly by HSCP to the care homes, and there has been uptake through the presumably the support of the care homes themselves and by family members supporting their loved ones in care homes. And in terms of any other resource that could be put into that, it's not something that we would ordinarily do within Revs and Bens, but it's certainly something that could be taken up with HSCP colleagues at Advice Services, perhaps. That could be a proposal there. But we do have to bear in mind the closing date of the fund, which is the 31st of May, unless, as Alan has said, there is an extension agreed.
Okay, Chief Executive wants to come in, Louise.
For yourself, convener, it's quite difficult to have a list of people who stay in the care homes. The HSCP will only have a list of people that they've placed, and so we looked at what other local authorities were doing, and Kate Rox, the chief officer, wrote out to all the care homes. And then I think COSLA came out with a template for us, but it was already written, so we followed it up again just to prompt them, to ask them if they'd had any response and to confirm that they had circulated it to the residents' families.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Cullen.
Thank you, Convener. Just on this matter, I think obviously it's looking at it, we're only at 8 days away from the deadline, so I suppose we can't really do much now unless we're able to convince people to move the deadline forward. I'm just wondering if officers are able to advise, do you have any idea about how much money has not been able to be claimed? If the UK government is estimating 1,100, we only had 100 applications. What is that? What is the quantum of that support that's not been taken up?
Well, thank you. An initial down payment was made to all councils by the UK government to represent 80% of their assessed take-up. So the council received almost £400,000. Clearly what has been paid out is less than £40,000. I'm assuming that there will be some form of repayment exercise that the UK government would undertake further down the line.
So it's £400 per applicant, is it?
It's 400 and 200 depending on the scheme that they're in. The 200 is the alternative fuel one, the one for people in caravan parks, etc., or who use oil based or off grid.
And there isn't a lack of desire on the part of the UK government to spend that money. They've allocated the money. So the issue is, how do we encourage people and get people to take up? And clearly we're not going to achieve that, and we're not alone in that. We're not going to achieve that by the 31st of May deadline. So I think it is important that we continue making those representations. And I would be happy, if the committee's happy, to write to the relevant UK government minister to make the case directly on behalf of the council as well. I'm sure Alan can speedily draft me up a letter to go to ASAP on that. Content with that?
Absolutely.
Yep. Elizabeth, you want to come back in?
Can I just get an update on what COSLA's actions are in terms of this, and if they're already taking action that have been identified as an issue?
It's been highlighted with COSLA, and at officer level has been taken up and asked this morning for a further update. I haven't heard back. Obviously, it's only been a few hours as to where they were, but I'm just highlighting now back from leave that I haven't heard anything regarding my initial request. So I'm hoping that we'll get a response that it has been extended, but I'm subject to the committee confirming what the convener said. I'm more than happy to get a letter out as soon as.
Absolutely.
Good. Chris, you want to come back in?
Yeah, just on some of the comments made by Mr. Buckland about the complication of the actual form itself. I suppose it's just making sure that we are going to write to the relevant minister of the UK government also to make that representation that might be a reason why people aren't able to claim the money. So it's all well good having £40, but if you have to jump around the Grand National Gate, you might not get that.
Yeah, I think in any letter will outline why we think that the take up will be low, and obviously ask if the deadline could be extended in a simpler way. I suppose that claiming the money could be bottled.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this matter or any other matter within the report? No? Okay, can we agree recommendations? Okay. The additional recommendation that I write to the relevant minister, and welcome Councillor McCormick, who was obviously having some challenges around connectivity. So welcome to the meeting, Michael.
Thank you. Sorry for the trouble caused.
Right, item 5 is the corporate policy update, and Mona is going to speak to that. Mona.
Thank you, Convener. Good afternoon, members. This report covers 4 aspects. Firstly, that we're progressing the new performance management arrangements in relation to the council plan. Secondly, at Appendix 1, you will find the template for the Gaelic language implementation report. Thirdly, in relation to corporate awards, we had a very positive session yesterday with the judges for Local Government Chronicle Awards, and we reference the process for that in the report. And finally, highlighting we would normally be getting NRS population estimates this time of year, but this has been delayed to later in the year. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Mona. Any questions, colleagues? David, Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, the mid-year population estimates, this is, in my view, pretty shocking that it won't be till late 23-24 before we get an idea of what population estimates are, because the census that was conducted by the Scottish Government really did not work. They decided to have it at a different time from the UK census, and it did not get reaction. Last figure I heard was an 80% response to the census, compared to something like 96% in the rest of the UK. So this is really very, very disappointing. My question, Morna, is there any way we can produce a figure earlier than that of our own VAT?
Thank you. Through you, Convener. Obviously, we can look for various data sources, see what we can compile, but really I think the NRS data and the census data will be the most reliable. We do have projection figures that are available from previously, so we can look at them again and share them with members, but unfortunately we are really constrained by these national data sources.
Okay, you can turn that, Councillor Wilson, but I'm not content.
No, thank you. Thank you, Morna. I've got another question.
Have you? Yeah. Put your light back on.
Get my money's worth here. It's about the paper on the Gaelic school. I opposed this at the Education Committee meeting. I think it's unnecessary. This is a very narrow language. I don't think it broadens the vista of our pupils enough. But within this paper here, in terms of our response, can I be reassured, and I did certain checks over the weekend around my ward in Kilmacombe and Port Glasgow. Nobody I can find anywhere wants Gaelic names as well as English names on the streets. Can I be reassured that we will not be doing that?
Okay, who's leading on the Gaelic language plan? Ruth?
So we've committed to look at prominent signage, not every single sign. So there is a requirement through the Gaelic Act that local authorities do consider prominent signage to be dual language.
But not the day-to-day stuff. Not Douglas Hill Terrace.
Unless there's a special request from the residents that do help us.
I wouldn't do the Gaelic translation for that reason.
I'll make sure that
Some of us have always thought Douglas Hill was in Gaelic. So.
I think it probably is, that's right.
Okay, is that you? You finished your
That's
questions? Elizabeth, you bear with me. I've got a couple of questions from colleagues who are attending remotely. So, Councillor Daisley, James.
Thanks, convener. Well, firstly, in contrast to Councillor Wilson, I'm very grateful and happy to see this report coming through and progress being made on especially secondary provision in Inverclyde. I've got a question around that actually. Well, I've got two questions. First of all, there's a mention of a green, amber and red scoring in the paper. I wanted to just clarify, is that something that comes back green, amber, red, or is it something you've highlighted in the paper? Because it's obviously the paper's black and white.
Well,
Thank you, through you, convener. Yes, that is something that we assess at our end in terms of the red, amber, green. I'm sorry that you don't have the colour version in front of you that would help illustrate that, but we can certainly make sure that's available to you.
Thanks.
We can't really afford the colour print these days, but it does say below the shaded boxes what the current assessment is, so it is there as well as amber or green. Okay, James, you got a second question?
Yeah, sorry. One more, please, if that's okay. So I just wanted to ask a question around page 39, which is Appendix 1. So the third bullet point down, plans have been progressed for the delivery of Gaelic medium education at secondary level within Inverclyde. So my question is, after the latest education committee, the special education committee around this particular subject, I would like to understand where we are with this specifically for provisions in Inverclyde for secondary education. Specifically around, there was a question around that for being a provision in 23-24. Ruth, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. Have we ascertained if that's necessary or not yet?
Okay, Ruth.
Yes, so as you know, the intent was to start from August 2024 and to undertake statutory consultation, and at the time of the Education Communities Committee, we didn't know if there might be a requirement for 23-24. Our understanding is there isn't. Pupils have been granted places at the Glasgow Gaelic Secondary School.
You okay with that, James?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much, Ruth. Thank you. Thanks, convener.
No problem, James. Natasha, you're next. Justin McGuire.
Thank you, convener. My question was around the mid-year population estimates. I just want to echo that I'm quite frustrated that we've not got this based on the fact that our budget floor did get moved a couple of days before budget meeting. So I don't know if there's a way that we can try to write to somebody to explain how this will impact the way that we'll plan going ahead. Just because I do think it is part of our planning strategy that we do have those figures, and to have to wait until late in 2024 to wait more than a year for these figures just isn't good enough. So I don't know if there's anything that we could do as a committee to try to get those figures a bit earlier.
Louisa, you got any thoughts on that? What representations we could get?
Through yourself, convener, we did make representations in relation to the population when the survey was happening, because obviously there was a lot in relation to digital. We also did some work through your voice to make sure that we were represented where our member applied because we were concerned, because obviously it links to funding. We can go back to those that we spoke to during that period of time to ask them if it can be expedited, but I'm not hopeful.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, Elizabeth?
Thanks, Kimmy. I thought my question was actually very similar to Councillor Maguire's, but I think it's not. I think it's separate. Obviously, there's a delay with the census, the sort of once in 10-year set of information that we get, but the mid-year estimates we get annually, routinely, but they have an impact on our funding from the government and things like that. So if we don't have that information, how are those calculations being determined for this year on an accurate basis? So not so much about what's coming out of the 10-year census exercise that's delayed, but in terms of specifically the mid-year population and how that sort of, you know, we're affected by the flood and all these things are determined by the demography of this area, and we don't have that information. So what are we doing as a proxy?
Alan, you able to pick that up?
I'm not an expert in this, but I think the best thing, as probably Louise indicated, is for us maybe to inquire of the Scottish Government and COSLA, because particularly if there's a multi-year budget settlement in December this year, then the figures that they use at that point in time are going to have a medium-term impact. So it's important that they're as accurate as possible. You know, if the figures come out in November, which is by my understanding the winter, 23-24, then they could be incorporated in the distributions. If they come out in January, which is still the winter, it's going to be too late for the settlement. So I just need to have a better understanding of what figures they're planning to use. But I think the thing that is pretty guaranteed is the census information will not be ready for that. It's going to be whether they take another mid-year estimate for the next budget round, and then comes in from 24-25 is when the census information will come in.
Okay.
Can I just ask that we do take the action that we need to take to sort of make sure that we're not passive in terms of that, especially if it does have an impact potentially on a mid-term financial settlement for us?
Yep, I think officers are obviously share the concerns of elected members and will take appropriate action to pursue this issue to be sure we don't, in a sense, lose out. So, okay, any other questions on this report? No? Okay, can we agree the recommendations of the report and obviously the suggested actions in terms of following up on the population estimate session? Okay, that takes us on to item 6, which is the Policy Resources Committee Delivery and Improvement Plan 2023-26. And again, Lorna's going to speak to that. Lorna?
Thank you, Convener. This report presents the Policy Resources Committee Delivery and Improvement Plan for approval. This contains areas of key strategic focus under the themes of people, place and performance, as well as related risks and performance indicators. There will be an annual refresh of this plan, and performance updates on the actions will be provided every second committee meeting. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lorna. Any questions or comments elected member? Martin, Councillor McCloskey.
Thanks, Convener. My questions are just specifically related to the risk register. So I think this is a really useful innovation that we've got this in the plans now, that we can see the risk, and you know, I think that some of it, especially in the financial risk, will be familiar to us, but actually just seeing it kind of in, well, I was going to say black and white on this page, but in bright red, if we had it in the colour copy, is quite, you know, brings the risk into stark focus. Just two questions of process and then just one on specific. So the first is, how are we determining, or how is the CNT determining what reaches the risk register, and what might lie at a lower level in kind of individual service risk registers? So what gets escalated to this level? Second question, how do officers envisage us as a committee kind of using this? And I know that there's a broader conversation around risk management that might feed into. And then the third question is just on the specific of the partnership risk here. I'm just wondering if someone could speak to that in a bit more detail, because the impact is still fairly high, more than the others, but I was quite surprised to see that we're scoring the likelihood of one of our partners not providing assurance or potentially failing is very high here. And I'm just wondering what kind of leads us to that conclusion.
Okay, Paula, you want to kick off, and you need to bring in area colleagues.
Certainly happy to, convener. Thank you very much. There was quite rigorous discussion with the CMT in terms of the risk registers. Obviously, it's a new development, having these included in the new iteration of the CDIPs. And we obviously look to have consistency across the 3 different CDIP models in terms of the level of risk and the type of risk that we're reporting to committee through this format. And we were conscious that these aren't service-specific risks, and they should be risks that are relevant to the work of the committees as a whole. So that was the approach that was taken. I think we will continue to refine this over time and work out how we best report on progress through this method. And as you referenced, the risk management strategy and guidance is under review, and there are further updates to come in relation to that. So we're conscious it needs to sit within that wider framework. But I'd maybe invite members in the chamber, but potentially Chief Executive, would like to come in relation to this. Thank you.
For yourself, convener. So, well, obviously we've got a risk management strategy, and you refresh one, but we've been looking at it as a corporate management team, and we did debate whether it would only be red risks. We've got matrix, obviously supported by our auditor, and we did debate whether it would only be red risks. However, we felt that some of the amber risks that we have are sufficient for committee to be cited on. And if you look at some of the providers and some of our other areas, there is potential failure in a big way, which will impact on the job of the council. And so that's how the partnership risk, which is amber, ended up on it. I would suspect that members would want to at least see the risk registers at least once a year. However, be assured through the risk management that if the risk registers change in any significant way, that the committee would be alerted as part of every second cycle as reporting on the plan. And so that's how I envision it would be well mapped out in the risk management strategy, which should be coming to members. We discussed it this morning. It should be coming to members after the summer recess.
I suppose just to follow up the question in partnership risk, so we've got a whole range of partners. So we've got the health boards, we've got police and fire, etc. Just thinking of partners as part of the alliance, but we've got a whole range of partner providers as well of services, and we know particularly in relation to care provision that there are huge challenges in that sector. So does that reflect the sort of, I suppose, the high risk score?
Through yourself, convener, as you're aware, and that's why I looked at Alan. For those who are not in the chamber, Alan brings a governance report usually every October on the reports into how we're managing any contracts and our governance meetings in relation to partners. But we know as a CMT that coming out of COVID, a number of partners, Everclive Leisure, others have really struggled financially, and therefore it's important that we make sure that the relevant committees are cited on what we think are potential risks that could be lying within the near future.
Stephen,
sure.
Yeah, I suppose on that then, on partnership risks, this is, I suppose, because this is the first time these are coming to committees in this cycle. I think we're all kind of going to be finding our way through what's most useful. I suppose what just strikes me about the partnership risk is it is that high, but the information you presented is quite broad, and it might have to be quite broad because this might go across a number of different areas, or it might be that it's one particular area. But I suppose just in terms of the usefulness of these documents is kind of tools for active risk management. I'm just wondering maybe in the future if there's a bit more detail about, if we think there's a particular risk to a particular service or a particular, I'm not saying, highlight a particular partner is likely to fail, but I'm just wondering if there's a way where that can be reflected so that when we see this, we're not thinking, oh God, there's a number of different areas where there's likely to be a problem. If it is the case, it's just a couple of individual suppliers, or whether you're looking at this. I'm not sure whether this is what could be referring to one individual organisation, or it could be a kind of wider systemic risk. And I'm not sure. I don't get the detail out of it. But I think that's just a learning as we've moved through this.
Please.
So yourself, Convener, we can relook at that.
Yeah.
Because obviously we see the rough register
Underneath
it, and so we can look at what the detail we're actually putting in. So obviously we're putting it at a high level to see if it's more helpful to members moving forward.
Thanks.
Okay. Elizabeth?
Thanks, Convener. I think this is so helpful. Even the conversation that we've just had is so helpful, because it's getting sight of what the risks are, and if 22 of us don't have a role in managing the risk in this organisation, then I don't know who does. So I'm really pleased to see risk as a stated element in the new plans. And it's like another feeling our way around how this is all coming about question that I've got. I'm just wondering what the discussion has been in terms of risk appetite underneath all of this, to actually determine what risk appetite's been for what's high, what's low, whatever, and who's sort of determined that. Because again, perhaps it's something that that the 22 members of the council might have a view on.
Please.
Through yourself, Convener, we've had a discussion about bringing someone in to do some work with elected members in relation to risk appetite at the same time as we have our new risk management strategy. A little bit like we have done in other areas.
Okay. I just think it's such a helpful direction to travel. Thank you so much.
I'm sure we'll have a varying levels of risk appetite among elected members. Alan?
Thank you for being so revert back to the questions that Martin was raising on the partnership risk. Obviously, the role of this committee is really the overarching review of the process. When you get to the annual report, specific committees will have specific responsibilities to ensure that they get annual reports on governance, whether it's in the applied ledger that goes to Roots Committee or ICDT, and there's something applied that goes to Stewart's Committee. The one thing we do know, as Louise said, is that without specific council intervention in the last few years, a number of our significant partners, I don't mean Elford, I mean those that provide services on behalf of us, would have gone under. And that hasn't gone away, and it's impacting on our budget. So the risk lies there, because ultimately elected members may be left with the decision to cut something else to protect a partner, or to leave a partner where it is with the risk that it may go under. And I suppose the 70 odd organisations that appear in the annual report that comes every October, November to this committee is just flagging up there is still a high risk post-COVID, high utility costs, increases in non-domestic rate costs. You'll be hearing it on a regular basis from some of the community organisations how they're struggling financially, and there's a high risk that they could go under. And one thing that Louise, Ian and I were discussing only this morning is it would probably worth a refresh of the process we've got for the governance of external organisations and bringing that back to this committee, because the world has moved on since it came in 2011. And maybe we need to have a refresh to ensure that it's still doing what it needs to do. So this is more the corporate approach, if that helps, rather than a specific, we want members to run away thinking we've got an eye on a specific organisation that's struggling. This is about the fact that of the 70 organisations we support, we know that the bulk of them are probably under significant pressure for various reasons.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, colleagues? No? Okay, can I agree with that recommendation? Okay. Right, that puts us on to item 7, which is the reserve policy triennial review, and Alan and Angela, I think are going to speak to this.
If it's my way, I can introduce it and Angela can ask all the difficult questions that you may have. So this report seeks approval for the updated reserves policy, which was last approved in September 2019. There's limited changes. The main thing is a technical change that we've moved from LAAP 99 to SIPA Bulletin 13. Largely the document is the same. It's updated some of its wording, The good news is that I think our reserves policy meets the requirements of that document and ties in with the FN code requirements as well, which were reviewed and approved by this committee earlier this year. As I say, both myself and Angela are happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Any questions from us? Councillor Robertson's got a burning question here.
It's a wee tiny question, it's a wee annoying question that I'm debating whether I should have asked or not. So just, I know it's probably we didn't get it because it's tiny changes, but it's just like a track changed version so that we know exactly what has changed from iteration to iteration of such documents.
Alan?
Yes, more than happy to provide. I think Ian's service provide a very good, and you'll see it later on in the agenda, a very good method of showing. It doesn't show every track change because otherwise it can get too busy, but it gets what the changes have been on a paragraph basis. I'm more than happy to produce that.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? No? Okay, can we agree with recommendations? Thank you. That takes us on to item 8, children's and poverty data and the anti-poverty budget update. There is that.
Yes, this paper is looking at children in poverty data and also use of the anti-poverty budget. So paragraphs 3.1 to 3.4 give an idea of the context, and this is one of a series of reports looking at the use of the anti-poverty budget. So it's not sitting in isolation. If we look to perhaps the statistics produced by the DWP looking at children in low-income families, and paragraph 3.6 shows that looking at relative and absolute low poverty in the Clyde is sitting at 21.3 or 15.8%, but with the 12th highest or the 15th highest level in Scotland, which is perhaps surprising because we wouldn't expect knowing other poverty indicators to see ourselves there. So we have started as officers initial conversations with the DWP and the Scottish Government, looking at exactly the data used for those statistics and whether or not the SILIF, the children in low-income families data, is a good indicator of poverty, because it is beginning to be increasingly used to be for identifying funding for local government. Section 4 looks at two uses of the anti-poverty funding. The first is to look at giving money to play schemes over this summer for 1 year only, just basically because we're still in the middle of the cost of living crisis. Families are still finding it difficult to make ends meet, and so the proposal is to use just over £23,000 to help fund the play schemes for this summer, and that's from the earmarked reserve. And the second is, as we've moved on with the initial funding, the corporate management team and now the anti-poverty group, and we're reverting to 1 day rather than 2 days per week of the anti-poverty officer. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks. Ruth, any questions or comments? Robert, Councillor Moran?
I thank you. I mean, I really welcome the funding in place, but I thought I brought up last year that not every child was in the catchment that could get a play scheme. And I hope that this year that every other child in Inverclyde who isn't within a catchment or one of the play scheme areas gets that opportunity. Now, I don't know if we're doing some work on that route, but I'd like to think if we are. So these other kids who live where I live, just 5 minutes from here, will get the same opportunity to attend a centre as the ones who are living near the schools and the centre we're on. So it's just that I hope that we do, it's inclusive this year, and every child gets the benefit of a play scheme place.
Ruth, are you looking at the provision?
Yeah, look, we're looking at the provision, to be honest, and it'll be very similar to the provision last year. What we're particularly looking at is the Scottish Government funding for school-age childcare, and we've changed that for this year. That was offered across the whole of Inverclyde, and it was a pilot funding. This year it's particularly looking at the Port Glasgow area because that had the least childcare availability. So we've changed that, but we will continue to monitor the play schemes and the uptake, and we'll continue to work on the the places.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it because we were getting stories last year that young children were turned up the room because they didn't belong in that particular area. And there never was an alternative to where it could go. So I hope this year we can fix that.
Well, I think it's because there isn't a geographic restriction in where you can apply to go to. The issue is that if there's not necessarily play schemes in a geographic area, the challenge is transport, etc., to another play scheme. So it's about how we try to ensure that there is widespread provision, that play schemes are relatively easy to get to. Okay, right. Who else is wanting to come in? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, convener. I really think that 3.6, the statistics in there are extremely disappointing. That we've got more children aged under 60 living in relative low-income families, and the proportion of children under 60 living in absolute low-income families have both increased in the last 2 years. Given the money that's been spent by the UK government, by the Scottish government and ourselves, I find these figures surprising. I also think that given the problem, I don't see what difference 23,250 is going to make to a poverty situation. I really don't. So my question there, is that Play for All, is that universal? Does that apply to anybody, regardless of their income within Inverclyde? And do you think that 23,000 is going to make much difference, Ms. Vinks?
Okay, so the first thing is a helpful one around the comparison of the statistics, because the DWP are basically saying the 3.5 says they recommend caution when looking at the data and making comparisons. What I would say is what we see is the difference across the whole of Scotland, and yes, the fact that we have people living in relative and absolute low income is something I think we will continue to address. Whether or not £23,000 will make a difference, it will make a difference to some lives across the summer. And Play for All is specifically for children with additional support needs, but the rest of what we're proposing here is universal play schemes, so there'll be no charge for the play schemes across the whole of Inverclyde. So that's inclusive.
I mean, I think in terms of the stats, accepting them to be treated with a note of caution, we did have a pandemic which had a huge impact on people's households and their income, etc. So we need to be mindful of that, and absolutely the UK and the Scottish governments did a tremendous amount to try and mitigate the impact of the pandemic, but undoubtedly they didn't mitigate 100% of the impact of the pandemic. We're now in the cost of living crisis as well, which is impacting families. The surprising thing, I suppose, is not that the stats have moved in a particular direction, because it's not just in Inverclyde they're moving in that direction, they're moving overall. The surprising thing at the stats is that in a Scottish context, we are 12th and 15th. We would normally be second or third. That's the surprising thing, right? Because that's where we are. We're in with West Dunbartonshire, Glasgow, North Lanarkshire, Dundee, etc., and high levels of poverty and deprivation. The fact that we are in the middle of the table is the surprising thing and the concerning thing, which comes to the allocation of resources. In the terms of the 23,000 for the play schemes, and I'm actually old enough to have went to summer play schemes, young enough to went to summer play schemes, so it shows you how long the summer play schemes have been around. And I personally benefited from attending summer play schemes in Holy Family Primary School for a number of years. That's a small part of our overall anti-poverty strategy. The ethos of this council, that runs through the core of this council, is trying to support families with anti-poverty. The anti-poverty fund itself is only a small proportion of the effort and money we put into addressing poverty but there's over £1 million still left in the anti-poverty fund, and that's why at the next meeting we'll have a report evaluating the current anti-poverty initiatives, including this proposal for the summer place schemes, and then look at the most effective use of that £1 million. But it's a relatively small amount of money, and it's not supposed to be tackling poverty overall. It's simply there to try and ensure that families from backgrounds of poverty and relatively low incomes get the opportunity over the summer to have some healthy activity, which, as I say, I benefited from when I was a young person as well. So I think it's a good, sensible use of this fund. I'll bring in Natasha. She was next, and then I'll bring yourselves in, Elizabeth and Chris. Natasha.
Thank you. Thanks, convener. I think it's important that we ensure that we continue to dedicate resource to this anti-poverty work. So I welcome the fact that we're looking at extending the officer the next 2 years. Hopefully at some point within my lifetime we'll be able to see things like anti-poverty measures being done away with, because hopefully one day we'll all have enough money to be able to live and look after our children without needing to dedicate so much time to this. The stats, I'm going to echo what was said earlier, the stats are quite harrowing, but from my perspective, sadly unsurprising based on what we know of the current economic situation, and to see the number of children, albeit that DWP suggests caution for us, to see the number of children, relatives and poverty is quite concerning. But I just wanted to thank our officers for actually raising this up with the Scottish Government, because I think with DWP suggesting that we should be cautious about how those stats are used, that for our funding then to be dictated from that. And I agree with what you were saying there, Councillor McCain, around who would usually be higher up, and we have worked hard as a local authority to try to ease some of the impacts for our constituents. So I welcome the fact that we're going to get an update on that, and hopefully our funding from the Scottish Government won't be adversely impacted based on these figures alone, because I would hate to see our children flung into even worse poverty because of something completely out of our control.
Okay, thanks, Natasha. Elizabeth,
Thanks. I guess I'm kind of looking at that 3.5 and kind of going, how did DWP want us to use this data? Because I would kind of want to be able to compare years and compare areas, and so I'm not really sure what the purpose of it is at all. And I know it probably sounds quite facetious, but maybe I'm being a bit facetious. I don't know how to use this. I don't know what we can actually do with it if we've got to have the caution to the degree that's stated in 3.5. Another kind of question that I had when I was reading through this was the last set of data that I looked at in terms of child poverty figures, and I think you and I corresponded in terms, or Ruth and I corresponded on it, came via the UK Parliament, which seemed to show that our child poverty figures were getting much better. So, I want something to hang my hat on. I want something that we can all hang our hat on and say, this is a state of play with a robust set of data that we can actually do some manipulation of and be confident in.
Right.
Yeah, it's perplexing, isn't it? I mean, there's confusing messages because there's different ways of measuring poverty. If you look at our free school meals, we wouldn't see ourselves, as Stephen has said, in where we wouldn't see ourselves middle of the table. We would expect ourselves see ourselves further in the deprivation. And the same when we look at multiple deprivation, which takes into account other issues. And we know that some areas of Inverclyde are in the most deprived areas. So this particular measure of poverty is one that we need to keep digging into. When I think, to be fair to the DWP, when they say they're recommending caution with comparison, I think it's on the trend data because of the COVID effect. I don't think they can recommend caution over comparison about where we're sitting. Our understanding is that the methodology is accurate for how they came to the figures, but we will see a spike because of the different COVID payments. But the Inverclyde picture doesn't seem to sit where we would naturally see ourselves.
Okay. Chris, right, man.
Don't know, Alan wants to come in at that point.
Al?
Thank you. I mean, yeah, related to this, I mean, ultimately this will end up being, it's a technical assessment, it's a technical issue, and it's a fact that a key indicator that is used to distribute funding and increase the amount of funding needs to be found for distributing funding for local government in Scotland. And some of that is due to the fact that we're using free school meal data, because you end up with universal free school meal and no longer have that data. And that was one of the main drivers, is that they needed to find a new measure. So that this is very little to do with the DWP. The DWP produced the information they were asked to produce. The big question is whether it's an appropriate measure to distribute funding in local government. And that's the discussion, which, to be fair, Scottish Government officials absolutely get. And we're fortunate we've got Hans Lenz, who sits on the DIWG, which is the Data Issues Working Group, which is 12 officers and Scottish Government statisticians who determine the distribution methodology or advise the best ways to distribute funding. And they are actively reviewing this due to the concerns that have been raised by myself initially and then via Angela, via the DIWG, that this didn't, to use the technical term, smell right. It didn't feel like Inverclyde that we're mid-table, and that this didn't seem the appropriate measure, which is why we had the discussion with the DWP. It will then go to the Settlement and Distribution Group that I sit on, and then ultimately will go to COSL leaders that Stephen sits on, and a decision. What I'm pushing for is this matter is solved before the next budget round. And we will continue to push to try and get it resolved, because as more areas are distributed on this basis, as we lose free school meal data and you get into things like PEF, which is a considerable sum of money, this area could lose significant sums if this methodology isn't right, and that's when it becomes serious, which is why it's important we get it sorted. So I understand the methodology, I understand what is being measured, but all that's been measured is income here, not expenditure. If you've got higher need, you get more income. But that means you spend that income because you've got higher need, but it stops at the income bit. And because households in Inverclyde, because we've maybe got more households where there's somebody with a mobility issue who gets a higher level of universal credit or support, that isn't taken into account. And so we move up the league table. And that's the thing which I'm trying to get them to look at. So you've got to look at the expenditure as well as the income side of things. And hopefully over time, we'll get that sorted. So that background helps.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Okay, any other, Chris?
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad I've got to call it, because I think that was very useful that we've not only we've raised the concern, but we think we've actually identified and possibly the causes of this as well, because it's, you know, it's not just a case of saying we don't think that's right because we want more money. It's the fact that we don't think it's right because of X, Y, and Z, which is very important. I just want to touch back on the place schemes. I think yes, it's very good. I'm just wondering, we've also had the game-changing funding from the Scottish Government with respect to the free school buses. I know my daughter's a certain age. She's now a lot more mobile than she used to be, and reliant on what they call me getting from A to B, getting the back easy on my bike. But so that's very good. But I'm just wondering, is that a way we can tie in to create sort of hubs that would enable people to actually get access to the play schemes? Because I'm taking Councillor Moran's point here that it might not necessarily be a facility in a particular area, but if we have make sure that we've got facilities in areas that's relatively easy for people to get to, it might help the situation and help people get access.
We are straying into the providence of the Education Communities Committee. However, a degree of latitude.
Yes, so where we typically see the use of free school, the free buses is with the older age range, so they're getting to the sports camps easier, the active schools things. We wouldn't tend to see the people who attend play schemes using buses. The kids tend to get themselves there, so they tend to go within the community rather than travel.
Okay, Tommy.
Yeah, I think it's at this point. I think there's a context here, and I'm just looking at the list of what we spent or anti-poverty money on, you know, and we do a really good job. It's something that I don't think we get the recognition we deserve on it, because there's a lot of good stuff goes on behind the scenes, and I'm thinking, are we just caught in a particular time slot here with the cost of living really affecting people with the energy bills, kind of avoid the energy bills and food. So is that more of a context why we're figuring we're slightly worse off rather than improving? Because we do a lot of work on inequality.
No, I don't think that's because it wouldn't, the issue I think for the council is not particularly the cost of living, it's the money into people's pockets. And I think what Alan was saying, that basically it's the SILIF data, the children in low-income families, just takes into account the money going in, and Alan's saying, but if you're getting extra money for different needs, it's not taking into account the money going out as well. So those who are long-term unemployed on perhaps unable to work would get more money coming in, but it's not taking into account the fact that they will have higher spend. So so I think when we're looking statistically, Inverclyde wouldn't be any worse off than the rest of Scotland for energy bills and things like that, but they're going to hit the same issues. It's where we're sitting in the ranking that officers are perhaps pushing back on, because we wouldn't expect to be seen there. We tend to follow the whole of Scotland around dips and troughs as well.
Okay, thank you. It's interesting to see how it develops, the conversations you're having. Thank you.
I think Louise wants to come in.
Through yourself, and just to add to what Ruth and Alan were saying, so when we did the Scottish Government DWP met with the corporate management team and we did the kind of deep dive, 48% of people who were on some kind of benefit were getting an enhanced benefit in Inverclyde, and that's what we think tips the income, which instead of putting us second puts us 12th. And so to be fair, the government through the various groups will look at that, and we'll continue to try and represent and understand and dig deep into that.
Okay. Alan?
Sorry, sadly I find this really interesting from a statistical perspective, but one thing again, and it's all the background which hopefully will help members, is what we're measuring is relative poverty and absolute poverty, and that has to be linked to a benchmark, and that benchmark is dependent on a percentage of the median wage. So what has impacted the levels of poverty going up has been things like a freezing of benefits for many years, but wages were going up. So that naturally meant more children would be in poverty, because the median, the bar that you had to be over to not be in poverty was getting higher, because what will happen, I may not be here to see it happen, but what will happen is that with benefits being uprated by 10%, you will see a drop in child poverty next year, because benefits will have gone up faster than wages will have gone up. So it's about the relative movement between wages and benefits determines percentages in poverty as well. And that's why you've got to be careful looking at the trends, because you're not always comparing like with like, because it depends on the relative movement of actual wages and benefits and government policy around either freezing benefits or adding 10% onto benefits or whatever as well. So all these things are in the mix that make it very complicated. I've got a lot of sympathy for the Scottish Government statisticians, the DWP people. All we're trying to do is make sure that Inverclyde isn't penalised because of that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, no other questions or comments? Okay, can we agree with recommendations? That takes us on to item 9, supporting employee recruitment and retention. Stephen's going to speak to that.
Yes, thank you. This report updates the committee on recent initiatives to support employee recruitment and retention, and asks the committee to note and agree to progress a number of related projects and proposals. There's quite a lot in this report, so I'll just highlight and draw your attention to a couple of specific parts. At 3.3, I've highlighted that we're not alone in this in terms of the council. It's an issue across local government in Scotland and other sectors. Some of you might have seen the Audit Scotland report last week, the overview of local government in Scotland 2023, and that talked about demands on workforce pressures and councils finding it difficult to recruit staff. So we are in a bit of a competing market here, retaining staff. I've highlighted at 3.7 a number of recruitment and retention initiatives that we have put in place and are progressing. Members will be aware of a number of these, I think, the Workforce Refresh Programme, the extension to the Modern Apprenticeship Programme, and certainly maybe the second last bullet is worth highlighting. Just at the committee back in January, we agreed to some changes to improvements in terms of conditions around atypical allowances, and we've now agreed that backdated to September 22. In terms of proposals going forward, I've highlighted that in section 4 of the report. Members will be well aware of the hybrid working pilot coming out of COVID. The corporate management team, we've reviewed this. We've involved managers, trade unions, employees in a review of the pilot. We think this has been successful, and it is we don't propose significant changes to the hybrid working arrangements going forward. So we're now going to formally incorporate the hybrid working arrangements into a new flexible working policy for the council, and that will come to this committee in September later this year. So that's a key part, I think, of attracting and retaining employees. But 4.2 there highlighted the reduction in the working week. I know we spoke about that before, certainly within the corporate management team. We have a 37-hour working week in Inverclyde. There's a mixed bag across the country. This is also an issue at a national level. Trade unions have asked for us to look at a reduction in the working week. So we have done some high-level work as a corporate management team around this, and I think we want to take this further into a bit more detail around scoping what the implications would be for the council to reduce their 35-hour working week. So we're only asking the committee to note that this is an ongoing piece of work at the moment, and it's intended to bring a more detailed report back to committee in 2023. 4.5 highlighted training grades. That's something that we've been doing more and more of, and we can't recruit technical posts. We're looking to grow our own. 4.6 is an important one. Members may be aware that the IGIB recently agreed a scheme whereby potential social worker employees can be supported financially through their final year at university. And some funding was agreed for that to attract people to come and work for Inverclyde and remain with us for at least a set period of time. We really want to expand that across other professions in the council where we have difficulty in recruiting and retaining employees. So we're asking the committee to agree to £100,000 of earmarked reserves by increasing the turnover target, not within the HSCP, but to give us that allocation to help support and attract graduates to difficult fill posts. And I've highlighted some of the key areas there. We've had difficulty in planning, regenerating building standards, accountants, HR advisors. There's quite a range, environmental health, but that's not an exhaustive list. We obviously would monitor that going forward. And we'd also utilise that fund as well to support existing staff in terms of succession planning going forward and growing our own posts. I've attached to the report a new succession planning, a refreshed programme that we've rolled out, and that's there for members, and that's an important part, obviously, of retaining and making sure that we can support people into promoted posts when people leave. I suppose the last one I'll highlight is the 4.12, and that's around the national pay position. I've already mentioned some of the claims, the asks of the trade unions at a national level around the working week, and we're looking at that locally, what the impact might be. We also have the payment of professional fees, which is something that, again, links to recruitment and retention of employees, and that's something that we'll monitor going forward and tap into a national working group on that. Another feature of pay agreements over the last few years have been seeing pay agreements bottom-loaded, and so we have seen the erosion of pay differentials at the bottom end of the pay structure, and that has impacted or potentially could impact. We've not had any difficulties with the review of pay structure in 2019. However, if that pattern continues, then I think we need to have a review of our grading structure, and I'm proposing that we certainly aim to do that in 24-25, and that might help to focus on the recruitment selection of our employees as well. So that's the key points. The main ask of the committee today is around the £100,000 from existing earmarked reserve to support the recruitment and retention of our employees. And maybe just to highlight the wording of the last bullet point there, it is really around to support the recruitment of the final year university students, but also we want to make sure we support the retention and succession planning of our existing employees, so that funding can be used for potential supporting our employees through qualifications into professional roles. But happy to take any questions from that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Stephen. Natasha?
Yes, thanks, convener. Just thanks first of all to Stephen and the team for bringing this report. It's quite thorough and I think you've explained it really well. I think the traineeship and the payment of university fees for students traineeship, I think is a great idea. Like yes, the awards ceremony that we had, we saw some people that have been with us for more than 45 years. So I think they definitely have a good history of doing that. So hopefully we'll be able to have some success with those posts that are marked here. With the university fees for students, I was just thinking back and I actually spoke to one of the officers earlier on today just about the teachers in the early years ones and about how that's been a success in the past and how I really think that this £100,000 will really complement the work that the HSCP is doing with social work positions, but hopefully it will help encourage some people either re-entering the workforce or maybe some people leaving school, think about a different career, maybe something that they've maybe not considered through school. The hybrid and the hybrid working, I welcome that. I think that hybrid working really can be a benefit from the pandemic. Something that we've learned is work-life balance is really important, and hopefully this will help us to retain staff as well as encouraging other people to join us as an employer, as people can maybe manage care commitments or even some recreational commitments alongside their workload. My question comes about succession planning under 4.8. I think it's great that we've got that guidance attached, but at some point will we get to see any succession plans around some of the roles that we're looking at succession plan at this committee or another committee? Is there any plans to share that with elected members?
Okay, Stephen?
Thank you, Convener. I think I picked that up okay. It's just about the roles that we feel support succession. Yeah. Okay. We do have a programme. We have had a programme in place, Councillor Maguire, for a number of years now.
Yeah.
And it is monitored through our own HR team, and it is a lot of the posts are around leadership posts and getting people into team leader posts and planning for service managers and heads of service leaving. Another part of that is around posts where there's single dependency. Being a small council, we have identified a number of posts across the council where there is a single dependency, and we need to plan for those individuals leaving or even going off absent, and we need to plan for that and make sure that we're sharing the knowledge and skills across that. So there is an annual report that comes to this committee. It provides a report on the implementation of the people and organisational development strategy. One of the actions within that is around the rolling out of succession planning. So the detail that you're perhaps looking for could be included in the annual report that comes back to the Policy and Resources Committee on the implementation of the People and OD strategy, if that helps.
Yes, that would be really helpful. I was aware that we had a plan. I was just wondering if we could just see a bit more detail. I'm not looking for necessarily names because that might breach some form of GDPR, but just actually being able to see that. And I really appreciate the fact that we do have single dependencies and previous workplaces I've worked in. We've called it I think it's called like the bus stop theory, where if somebody was to be ran over by a bus this morning, what impact would that have on the workplace? So I think it would be great to see that as part of the annual report to this committee, if that's possible, and then maybe go to the rest of the committee.
Okay. Robert?
Thank you. I'm going to take 3.3, 3.7 in one read. It said all councils call report some recruitment retention issues, and when I was on call with my colleagues who are chairs and vice chairs, IJBs, and it's because they're poaching off each other, because it's different rates of pay, it's different terms and conditions. Until we fix that problem here in Inverclyde, we're going to be the same problem with people leaving here to go to North Ayrshire and Renfrewshire because their term conditions and the rates of pay is better. he said a recruitment campaign for home care. I understand that recruitment campaign wasn't very successful. And until we address this situation, this would present a real critical risk to this council. We have to make this job a career. We have to take them in, give them a path, a career structure, opportunity for promotion, the opportunity to go on to maybe other fields where you want to become nurses, social work, whatever. It can no longer be the Cinderella service. Home care is critical to this council. And as soon as we address the financial disparity between this council and probably other councils, we will always struggle. So I would say here that, yeah, we could have recruitment drives and all the rest of it, but it doesn't appear to be working. And to me, I perfectly blunt, because our rates of pay are too low for this particular worker, the home care worker. And I hope that this council recognises that, and the way you talk to the health and social care director, and maybe they can come to some arrangement where we can look at this. Because this, I was on a meeting with Michael Matheson, the new cabinet secretary, and he is very clear in his mind that he doesn't want to see us in this situation coming the summer, end of summer, start of winter. It's a critical risk if we don't fix this. So I hope that we can take it forward here and fix it before we hit the winter, we hit the real problems again.
Yeah.
Stephen, you want to come in, and maybe Louise wants to come in as well.
Yeah, thank you. Through your convener, yeah. Councillor makes a lot of good points there. And I think certainly the idea about growing their own is making an offer to young people coming out of school for a career in local government is the way forward, and that's what we're planning to try and do as part of this paper. Home care is a very significant area in terms of vacancy levels that we've got at the moment. I know the director is undertaking a review of home care at the moment, and HR is working with them on that. Certainly rates of pay, that there is issues not just with neighbouring councils, but we do pay more than Renfrewshire, for example, in terms of home care. But there is issues around competing with other sectors, retail sector and things like that, and we need to have an eye on that. So, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure that people are paid for the value of their job, and that's probably something that will come out of the home care review as well.
Louise.
Through yourself, convener, just to add to that, obviously the home care paper is due to the IBB shortly, I believe, and although it's not concluding, it's the element is in fact our own workforce. But there is a bigger issue in relation to that. It's not about pay, it's about attracting young people into social care. When you can go and work in Tesco's and get more money than you would in social care, until there is a kind of, and it's because of the issues in relation to personal care, in relation to home care in particular. And I know that, because I was a home care worker many years ago, but it's very unusual for someone who's 18 to want to go and work in home care. We just need to make it a much more attractive place to work, and see it as part of their journey of working for the council, where they'll be able to move. And just to give some reassurance, I know that that's a priority for the Chief Officer in the GB.
Okay, thanks for that.
Can I just go back to that? I mean, I agree with Bruce, you said that. You know, if you make it the bottom with the opportunity to progress. I know a young woman who was working in home care. She wanted Kentucky Fried. She wanted to be a nurse, and she studied part-time when she was working in one of the jobs. She qualified there last year, and she worked with her own family. But she started off in home care, but she had ambitions to be better than that, and she used it as a step up. And she'll tell you quite frankly, the work she done was to choose to go back to college, to get a higher, go back to university, and qualify as a nurse. And that's the story I'd like to tell people. If you come into home care, there's a good chance your career will improve, there's a ladder to success there. We can give you that. You don't have to be at the Cinderella service, which is, was looked upon at the moment. That's the way you give people in there. Give them a career structure, give them promotion prospects, give them an opportunity to advance. That's where we'll get people in the home care team.
Okay, we look forward to seeing the proposals that are going to come to the IJB, Robert, that you'll be chairing shortly.
We are, please, yes.
So we've got every confidence in you that you'll deliver that change. Okay, Elizabeth, you're next.
Thanks, Convener. I think a couple of points really. One, there are so many good ideas that have been brought forward in this paper, and I think it is all to be welcomed. We know we've got a task ahead of us. We know we've got some real pinch points, some problem areas, and we're not sitting in our hands. We're saying here are things that we can do to address that. I think that's all for the good. So really pleased at the ideas that are coming forward. A bugbear of mine that relates to this is I really struggle with the length of time that it takes for someone in a recruitment journey into employment with Inverclyde Council. I'm aware of many situations, and I don't like talking. I don't even want to talk about anecdotes, but someone gets interviewed on day one, and 3-4 months later they're still not fully employed and embraced with a badge that says that they work with Inverclyde Council, and I just think that I don't understand why that happens, and I think that's part of an issue that we have in terms of recruitment and retention that would be really good to tackle as well. And the third thing is probably, that's a question, that second one's a question, but the third one is also, I think when we look at the succession planning document that we've got, in many ways it is what a good leader within the organisation would naturally be doing anyway, but it's really good to have it articulated as a statement of intent. This is what we do want to do to grow leadership within the organisation. And the question I always have about policies like this is, how are we ensuring? It would be good to get evidence of how this policy is working, how it is being enlivened, and that it's not just a statement of intent, but that we are actually realising succession planning through what we're trying to do.
Stephen?
Thank you, through you, Convener. Yeah, I think 2 points there, Councillor Robertson. I mean, certainly we're aware of some issues around recruitment and retention, and for some of these delays, there are valid reasons in terms of safe recruitment processes, references, various checks and things like that. But certainly we want to try and improve that if we can. You might recall that we're undertaking a review of HR at this moment in time, and we're specifically looking at the recruitment areas in terms of trying to streamline processes where we can make them electronic, etc., and see if we can speed things up, because we're aware of that. So we're hoping there might be some recommendations out of that if there are areas where we can improve timescales around recruitment. In terms of succession planning, what we rolled out is we've already had a session with heads of service around the steps in the succession planning process. There's a corporate workforce development group that will look at monitoring. That's got representation across services across the council, and that will also be monitored as well through the MT's meetings as well, in terms of ensuring that those plans are being implemented, and actions are being taken to look forward in terms of developing people's skills. Tying into that is maybe worth reminding the performance appraisal process as well. I've highlighted that as well as in the report around making that more focused on succession planning and giving people the skills and the knowledge and experience to move to the next level. So it's all very much geared at not just training people up for the level they're at, but obviously for future leaders as well.
David, Councillor Hobson.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Stephen, this is an excellent report, well put together, extremely comprehensive. My only regret is we possibly could have done with it 9 months ago, which would have, I think, helped to solve some of the problems we're experiencing today. I would like to go to 4.4 with regard to the just 37-hour working week. I think we are pretty unique in this. I don't know many places of 37 hours, and the people we're losing staff to are all on a 35-hour week. So I'm supportive of it moving to 35-hour week. What I would like to ask, why have you not brought this today for us to make a decision today on moving from 37 to 35, and so we can move ahead. It'll help us in recruitment and not have to wait till later this year. Thank you, Steve. A bit of a compliment and a wee bit of language.
Thank you. Convener. Yes, the reason it's not here for a decision, because I think there's a lot of detailed work needs to be undertaken in order to understand what the service delivery impact is going to be of this, and also any potential costs that will be involved in this. Dropping hours by 2 hours per FTE across the council is a significant reduction in productivity time. So there will be an impact across services, and services will need to manage that. So we want to embark. We've done some high level work on this, but I think the CM corporate management team will agreed that over the next few months we'll do some more detail on that and bring it back to this committee once we've got a full understanding of the cost and service impact needed in this.
One question, will that be to the next meeting of this committee?
We're aiming for later in 2023, so I don't think it'll be the next meeting of this committee because it's a significant amount of work to be done.
The answer is no.
Unlikely to be next.
Councillor Owens is quite happy to give officers a blank cheque to go ahead and do this without actually knowing what the implications are. I don't think that's necessarily a check.
The big bucks.
Well, well, it might be big bucks that are going to feed into the big challenges we've already got in terms of finances, and Robert's right in terms of let's pay our home care workers more, but I just remind people 84% of our council's funding comes from the Scottish Government. So the fundamental reality is if we're going to pay our staff more to attract new staff and keep staff, there's a price tag and we need to work out where the money's coming from for that. So that's the reality check for some of us. Okay, Martin, I think you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Just two quick questions, Stephen. One is just to pick up on what Councillor Wilson was saying there. I understand it'll be difficult to say exactly what different authorities' hours are, but in terms of the neighbouring authorities that are our kind of direct competitors, does this bring us in line with the North Ayrshires, Glasgow, Renfrewshire, Western Bartonshire at 35 hours? And then the second question, and I appreciate this might be slightly niche, so it might be that we deal with this outside of the committee at some point, but I'm just wondering under employee benefits on 4.9, this is to connect to something that was raised with me by a resident recently. What is our policy with regards to providing people with time off, both for the reserve firefighters and armed forces reserves? Do we have a policy in place to allow people to take either unpaid or paid time off to participate in those kind of activities? Thanks.
Okay. Stephen, thank you. Thank you, through you, convener. Certainly in terms of our special leave policy, there's scope within that to grant time off, paid and unpaid, for the reasons that you've outlined. So there is scope in our special leave policy. In terms of the 37 to 35, there is a mixed bag across the country. I won't be able to quote everybody's at this moment in time, but I think if you look at Renfrewshire and our neighbouring authority, they have a split workforce, approximately half work 37, half work 35. And that's split into really the former manual workforce and the APT&C workforce. You know, so again, Western Barton have a 35-hour working week, but there is a mixed bag. A number of councils have 36. So, and that's potentially an option to be explored as well. But so there is a bit of a mixed bag, but certainly it's 37. There are a small number of councils that still have 37. We're not alone in that.
Thank you.
And in days gone by, a lot of the cloud employees did work a 35-hour week as well. So yeah. There was a mix, that was before sort of status, etc. So there is a history, and that was all negotiated with the trade unions as well. But there is a desire clearly on the part of national trade unions to work to a shorter working week. There's a desire to move to a 40 week at some point as well, which we'd all love to do if we can afford it. Okay, there's a long list of people here, Stephen. It's, your grilling is not over yet. James, you're next.
Thank you, convener. There's been just regarding 4.8 again succession planning. There's been a few mentions on the report of lateral job moves. So I'm assuming that is to cope with cross-functional vacancies and gaps, and where gaps are. But also, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but please clarify, it's maybe to avoid a glass ceiling where maybe the successor or the potential successor has become ready for a role and the role's likely to not be available until someone retires. So I just want clarification on that, because people, when they get developed and primed for succession, they can become, or they can lose engagement, as I'm sure you know. So clarity on that, and just to understand how wide the scope of that, the lateral job moves would be. So where would people be pointed towards or be trained in?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you through your convener. I mean, in terms of the lateral job moves, that's something that we have done a small degree at the moment, and it's something that can help develop people, perhaps following performance appraisal process, and to look at developing their skills. You're absolutely right. I think there's a few things managers need to take into account. One thing would be workforce demographics. You know, we do know that we have an ageing workforce, and we do know that we have, you know, a lot of experience that could be walking out the door at a certain period of time over the next 2 or 3 years. So I think that's a factor that we take into account when we're developing somebody for the next level. But as we know, recruitment and retention is a bit of an issue. We never know when a manager's post or a head of service post is going to fall vacant. So it is important that we put arrangements in place to develop people for the next level. I mean, sometimes we've also been through some voluntary severance exercises in recent years, where we've had people leaving a year down the line, and that's afforded us the opportunity to retrain individuals into that role and give people the opportunity to take on those roles. But there is the potential for unplanned vacancies arising. And so really, as part of the succession planning programme under the performance appraisal process, it's just about being able to develop people to be able to move into that next level as quickly as possible. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just ask something else? So there's it mentions that there's a variety of activities and initiatives around succession planning at the moment in Inverclyde Council. So I'm assuming then that this would be a complete culture change if it's going under one particular procedure. And how do you see that landing?
Yeah.
Thank you. Through you, convener. We have had a succession planning programme in place since 2017. I think it's fair to say it's probably now more important than ever. And I think there needs to be a higher level of focus on succession planning. So I think there are opportunities. We have looked at different options, work shadowing. You've mentioned the cross working at different services and giving people experience in those areas. We've also looked at coaching. We've had a mentoring programme in the past, and that's something I want to bring forward to the corporate management team in recent future. So there's a number of aspects there. I think it will land very well. I think that employees will welcome the opportunity to be developed and have the opportunity to go for promoted posts when they come up. So, I mean, I think to answer your question, I think it will. I don't think it's a major culture change. I think there needs to be a bit more focus on it. And I think it will land well with the workforce in terms of affording them development opportunities.
Okay, thanks for that. And Chris has decided to go easy on you. Tommy, it's going to be potentially your final inquisitor.
Stephen, how many students does 100k get?
The answer is it depends, I suppose. You can do that. I mean, I think it depends. the different levels of qualification have different costs attached to them. So if we are, for example, aiming to take an existing employee through a professional qualification in planning, whatever it might be, the cost could be £2,000-3,000 over a period of time, and that's a guess in it. Whereby if we're supporting a potential recruit coming in who's maybe still in their final year of a master's qualification, then the cost could be £1,000. So it depends how we need to look at what the needs are, what the key areas are that we want to focus this £100,000 on. So depending on the costs associated with the different qualifications, will determine the number of existing employees and new employees we can potentially recruit.
Thanks, Ian. I'm sure you'll let us know in the course of time, but thanks for that.
And it's a pilot, and if it's successful, yes, it could be continued on. Any other member want to ask any questions? No. Well, you'll be pleased to know I'm going to go easy on you. Unlike the other members, I recognise this as potentially your last meeting of this committee. So I'm not going to give you a hard time and a grilling. I just want to recognise the fact that you've given us 9 years of very exceptional service to the council. I think you've got 38 years in total local government experience, if I'm not wrong, and not quite the 45 we were seeing, but it's a long number of years to be serving in local government. So I want to thank you for the support you've given to me personally as convener. I think I've been your convener throughout those 9 years, and to this committee and to the council in general. I think you've been a source of very wise counsel, very calming influence on us as well. And I like your jokes, Stephen. Not everybody likes I like your jokes. So we'll miss that wise counsel and that calming influence and those jokes. We'll maybe have you back to the Staff Awards next year to be the compare. But on behalf of myself and the committee, I wish you a long and happy retirement when it comes. Okay, thanks, Phil. Can we agree with the recommendations? Okay, moving on to item 10, which is the data protection policy review. I think Vicky's going to speak to that. Vicky?
Thank you, Convener. The purpose of this report is to present an updated data protection policy to the committee for approval. The policy was last updated in 2019 to reflect the introduction of the GDPR, and it's been reviewed and updated with relatively minor changes to reflect operational practices, including hybrid working, and slight changes to the legislation and designations and contact information. The changes are summarised at Appendix 1 of the report, which can be found at page 110. Subject to committee approval, the updated policy will be cascaded to management teams and staff, and refresher training will also be offered. As I've stated at paragraph 4.3, a performance report will come to committee later in the year, which will set out an assessment of the council's compliance with data protection legislation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Vicky. Any questions for Vicky?
No.
Councillor Wilson said no. Vicky, can I just, I'll refer to Ellen, can I just thank you for the presentation of the report? I think it was very clear that the appendix was very helpful to follow the changes to the policy. So I think that is a good template potentially for people to look at using in the future. So thank you for that. Okay, can we agree on recommendations? Agree. Right. Okay, please. Moving on to item 11, which is the review of committee report format. Now, that's not as well presented, I have to say. I won't joke.
Thank you, yes, this is just presents an updated report, a review of the committee report format. Members of the committee will remember that last June an updated format was approved, subject to your review here. So we brought this back, only potential 2 changes that we've highlighted, both in connection with how potential implications are identified, but we'll update the annotated template and associated guidance. And subject to committee approval, we'll roll that out for the The cycle committee starting after the recess. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Any questions? No, everybody's happy, it's very clear, Ian. So, we look forward to rolling out. Okay. That takes us on to item 12, Freedom of Information Annual Report 2022. Carol, I think, can we speak to that?
Thank you, Convener. Good afternoon, members. So this is the routine annual reporting of our Freedom of Information statistics. The report covers the period the 1st of January to the 31st of December 2022. Appendix 1 gives a breakdown on detailed performance updates on the Council's performance. This year we had seen an intervention given to us by the Scottish Information Commissioner, and an update is provided within the covering report in relation to that. One of the key highlights to note would be our ending performance for the year. At 91% of our requests were responded to on time, which is a considerable improvement to where we were positioned last year at this time. An update on the Council's monitoring of the performance that has been undertaken following the intervention is also provided within the report, and there's also a section within the report at 4.12 which covers off at the ceasing of collation of information relating to the time and cost, collation of cost and time involved with coordinating our responses for freedom of information requests. I would hand over the recommendations and be happy to handle any comments or questions you may have about the report.
Thank you, Carol. Any questions for Colin? No, you're not getting off lightly today, Carol. Councillor Robertson caught my eye first.
Thank you. Page, page 147. Carol, if it's okay, the top, the table that's at the top of the page. I'm looking at January to December 2022, and it's not the largest number of requests. It's not the largest amount of, well, it is the largest, but only marginally the largest amount of money that we've spent on servicing FOIs, but a huge number of hours, far more than any other of the previous, what's that, 5 years before it. I'm just wondering what's happened in terms of the number of hours that we're spending.
Yeah, so yeah, happy to answer that through you, Convener. What we've basically had is there's been continual monitoring to improve the recording of this information, and just as we've finally sort of nailed it, we've come to the conclusion that the value and time and effort that goes into that is outweighed by the benefit overall, because the costs will go up as each year goes on, but simply it's accurate recording consistently this year. So it's the first year that we've seen every area have all their cost recording captured accurately, whereas historically we've had pain points throughout the year, and that's the reasoning for that, Councillor Robertson.
I'm not sure if that covers costs, which were really very different, but time.
Yep, it's just the accuracy. It's just complete accuracy around the various different officers at different levels that have been involved in the collation of the information. It's just the most accurate it's ever been. I think historically there's been entries captured, but the degree to which that's been captured is questionable.
Okay.
So they're not previously recording the time accurately in the sort of time sheets.
That's exactly it. So it's the most accurate it's been, but at this point, as I say, the time and cost effort to pull all that together is outweighed by the overall benefit we receive on a day-to-day, month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter basis.
Okay, thanks.
Can I just, it's not even in it, it's just on the back of that, and this is probably a request for next year, just that we kind of get a wee aid memoir about that really this year, 2022, is the baseline year for the fullest, most accurate methodology for recording this. And just because obviously we are only seeing this every once a year, so it'd be really good if somebody could remember to remind us next year that that's in fact the case.
Yeah,
yes, thank you. Through you, Camille. What actually we are suggesting in the report is that we don't report this anymore, because we don't think there's a cost. We don't think there's a benefit to the council.
Sorry if I haven't picked that up, sorry.
But you still record the requests and the performance again. You can start you're not going to have this people sit down and say, I spent 20 hours on that particular request recordings.
Okay, apologies for not picking that up.
Okay, Chris.
Thank you, convener. So I suppose, looking at this, the thing that's probably was a level 1 intervention, and obviously it's been addressed, but I'm just wondering what is the ultimate sanction by the Information Commissioner on a non-compliance? And so that'd be the first question. The second one is, I think one I've asked previously, but just we're getting 1,000 requests a year, which roundabout, but it goes up and down. And the report always goes into sort of like looking back, but I'm just wondering, is there any particular requests, etc., that there are a number of requests with maybe change the information that we typically release to actually avoid having these what you call requests coming in the first place?
Okay.
So there's a review of these requests to see if there's anything we need to change.
Carol, one and then
Through you, convener. So I'll take the first question first and answer that. So in terms of the intervention, there's various different sanctions that can take place when the Commissioner gives us an intervention. What the report didn't cover today is that we just have been notified that the intervention is actually being closed. But what could happen is that the Commissioner creates a team who come in and work collectively with the Council and almost give us a very instructional approach to how we are handling our requests. That is obviously not what happened in this case. The Council had recognised its issues early on around our timescale management and had put plans in place and monitoring process and revisited training for all officers involved in the process. Ultimately as well, there can be public notification when such interventions are put in place. So that's one of the other risks of it. But we've been very fortunate to have received positive praise from the Commissioner for the work that we've undertaken in terms of addressing that. So that's first point covered. Second question, in terms of the number of requests and potential for reducing them. So there will be from time to time repetitive requests. One of the points that are covered within the report is the enhancement or request to continue to consider where we can proactively publish information to make it more readily available on our website for requesters to locate that information themselves, or to also cut down on the amount of time we would spend in responding to the request by pointing them towards the information on the website and covering that off within the response that we give. The other options that are open to us is a disclosure log, and that's not completely off the table to be reviewed as a process, but we're just not in a position to do that at present time, and it's something that we'd be looking to explore in the future.
Okay. Okay, Chris, have you got to
No, just what do you mean by disclosure log? Is that just a log that's available to everyone on previous Freedom of Information requests? Yeah.
So in essence, it would be a published page which would show the disclosures on all our Freedom of Information requests, but on a redacted level, i.e. we wouldn't be releasing the information of who requested. We would just have it as a reference number and the request detail that was shared with the person who'd made that request, and then that would be accessible to all requesters that would potentially be looking for information. Again, I would probably just hasten to add as well that feedback from our surveying of other local authorities who have done this have said it's a bit of a double-edged sword. There's a lot of effort goes into publishing the information, but you don't completely negate the request coming in. So there is still effort that has to go into responding to requests, but certainly you can perhaps cut down a bit of time in pointing the requesters to the right place to find that information.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Carol. Natasha, Councillor McLeod.
It's okay, my question's been answered. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Martin?
Thanks, Can I just ask a follow-up on Councillor Hurley's question, which is about the disclosure log? If we had the disclosure log and people were able to look at it, that would obviously stop the request. But at the moment, if somebody puts in a request for information that's the same or very similar to a previous request, does that then trigger a whole additional FY process? Or is it kind of short-circuited because a similar request has already been processed?
So,
Yep, through you, convener. Yep. So in essence, in a scenario like that where it's something which is frequently requested, so a typical extract maybe on some form of reporting that we do, you would in essence cut down perhaps the amount of time that you spend on collating that information because you've got it available. If it's not already published on the website as well, because I do have a number of them that we deal with. But in essence, you would have that information. You would have a previous request that you have used for that purpose that you would be able to adapt. Sometimes what you do find is though that people don't ask the same consecutive questions, so that's where you've got to really analyse and look at the request to make sure that we respond to it appropriately. Hopefully that answers that for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? That was a good drill and Carol got as well. Okay, agree with the recommendations? Okay, thank you. Right, so that takes us to item 13 of the agenda, which is obviously